Hello, and welcome back to another webinar day with Charity Digital. To those of you who've joined us before, it's great to have you back. And to our first-time listeners, we hope today's session will be the first of many with the Charity Digital community. For newcomers, here's a quick update of who we are and what we do. Charity Digital is a charity that helps organisations grow their impact using digital technology. And we do this through a number of services. We have Charity Digital News, which is a media platform where organisations can access the latest digital news, insights and resources. We have Charity Digital Exchange, which is the UK's only discounted and donated technology platform that has saved charities almost £240 million in software and hardware costs. We also have Charity Digital Jobs, which is a job board that connects charities to the best digital recruits looking for their next role. We also have Charity Digital Mail, which is our white-labeled email marketing platform that helps combat the pain points of platforms like MailChimp and others. And finally, we have our Charity Digital Payments, which is a tailored payment processing solution for charities. Today's webinar is all about how charities can drive donations by getting to know their audience. With more ways than ever before to engage with supporters, funders, and beneficiaries, digital marketing is evolving beyond the basic uses of social media, email marketing, and paid advertising. We're thrilled to have Nigel Taylor with us today. He joins us from digital experience experts Acquia, and he'll be sharing key digital marketing insights, as well as the tools you can use to better understand your donors, what their interests are, when and how they like to donate, and how they like engaging with your charity. As always, a few housekeeping rules before we get started. Quick reminder that we'll be hosting a Q&A session towards the end of the webinar, so make sure you stick around for that. If you want to submit a question, you can do so at any time by hitting the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. If we happen to run out of time before your question is asked, don't worry. We like to record the answers afterwards, and we'll send these out in the recording of the webinar that we'll share via email in the next week or so. But that's all from me for now. I'd like to move over to Nigel. Welcome, Nigel. Thanks for joining us today.
Cheers, Chris. So hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. We're focusing on how digital marketing is evolving beyond the traditional marketing methods for social media, email, and paid advertising, and how you can use it to better understand your donors and deliver meaningful digital experiences. So this session is aimed at those of you who are responsible for your organization's public campaigns, or if you work within marketing or IT and are looking for new ways to reach your donors. So we've got a lot to get through today. The primary focus of the webinar is that your donors have become more sophisticated in how they want to engage with charities, and how the current methods, including social media, need updating to deliver personalized and meaningful engagement. So my name is Nigel Taylor. I've been working in and around information systems for the last 21 years in the United States and Europe. And in the last few years, I was part of a large marketing team using the types of tools discussed in today to deliver on branding, positioning, and customer acquisition. I'm currently a solutions consultant at Acquia. Acquia is the open source digital experience company. It empowers the world's most ambitious brands to embrace innovation and create customer moments that matter. Our CTO created Drupal, which I'm sure you've all heard of. It's the open source content management system that now powers more than 4,000 organizations. These companies are using Acquia solutions for hosting, content, digital experience, and e-commerce. And we're a market leader. We've placed as a leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for the last 6 years in a row, and we're described by Forrester as scoring highest for strategy, deployment, configuration, and scalability. So over the next 40 minutes, we'll take a look at how charities are currently engaging with donors over digital channels and evaluate some of the strategies needed to meet changing donor preferences, such as personalization to understand your audience through targeting and segmentation. And by doing so, gain user insight and increase web conversions. We're also going to take a look at how some organizations are using digital tools to win at fundraising and promotion. First, we're going to briefly review the challenges facing charities today and understand that while engagement across social channels is good, the audience is changing and their demands are different. Second, we'll examine what needs to be done to meet these changing demands. We have all moved beyond static websites, but where are you on the digital maturity curve? And third, we're going to take a look at how to create a personalized experience across several different journeys. what this means to you in terms of data, content, and meaningful engagement with the donor. And then finally, we will go through some case studies and examples where charities have leveraged some of these digital tools and the successes that they have had. But before I start, I'd just like to mention that everyone will receive a complimentary copy of this presentation in PDF format, so don't worry if I move too fast for you, you'll get it afterwards. It's also going to be available for download on the Charity Digital website or directly from acquia.com/webinars. And we're going to reserve time at the end for questions. We have several hundred attendees for today's webinar, so if you don't have your question answered, submit them anyway, don't worry about it, and I'll answer as many as I can individually at a later date. So challenges in the charity sector. A lot of the data points on this slide should be very familiar to you, and I'm expecting a lot of nodding heads. However, it's important to revisit these to establish why your digital strategy is vital and why you should keep being constantly looking to keep it fresh. Each year, the Charities Aid Foundation surveys charity leaders to understand the challenges they face and to assess the impact these challenges have on the sector's ability to meet the needs of its beneficiaries. One of the underlying concerns right now, of course, is the impact our future political landscape will have on government support. 92% agree that they will be expected to fill the gap that the public sector will leave. And this is already having an impact, as 83% saw an increased demand for their services in 2018. A large number of respondents highlighted the sector had been badly impacted by negative media coverage and public trust being an issue. But the greatest of concern, of course, highlighted by nearly 60% of charities, is that generating more income is paramount and it becomes a key focus. But it's not doom and gloom, not completely. The majority of charity leaders are optimistic about the future of their own organisations and for the sector in general. And it's relevant for today's presentation that significant numbers of you have stated that they have invested in digital technology or are planning to do so. So other great statistics to keep an eye on are the global internet usage reports across devices and channels. They break down in a number of ways. We can see here that of all social media users, 66% of them are aged under 35 years old. So they're technically all millennials. And they are spending over 8 hours a day accessing the internet, of which close to half on average are using their social media accounts. So as you probably know, this is the new audience everyone is trying to engage with across many different channels. And each channel is trying to be relevant and retain their user base on an ongoing basis. So, contrary to popular opinion, Facebook actually isn't dead. It continues to attract users and it has 35 to 40 million active every single month. But of course, Instagram is the rising star right now and it adds an extra 38 million users globally in 2018. And these are significant because between them, these platforms have a network reach for advertising of 70 to 80%. With users following a brand or a business of some kind. So it's easy to see that social media continues to be and will remain for some time as the most attractive channel to engage with audiences. However, it's not all plain sailing. You have to be able to deliver content across each of these channels and adapt to the social media peaks and troughs accordingly, because as we saw with Snapchat, and we are beginning to see with Twitter, each of these platforms is subject to the approval of its user base, and therefore it can fall in and out of grace accordingly. But we all know social's where it's at, and no wonder then that charities and non-profits are making great use of social media as a means of contacting donors. Of the 4 main social media channels, nearly all of you have utilized Facebook and Twitter. But you can see here, perhaps LinkedIn and Instagram are being slightly underutilized. This is incredibly relevant. If you look at all the internet usage across all demographics, not just the under 35s, you can see that nearly everyone uses social media or messaging. Everyone spends a significant part of their day on social media channels, and they have multiple accounts across different channels and devices. So this focus on social media is emphasised by the CAF report from the previous slide. It reports that nearly all charity leaders continue to place importance on their social media presence. 95% of you have already increased or plan to increase your social media presence activities and campaigns. But fewer than half have a strategy in place for dealing with technological change. And as we're going to see later, reacting to trends in adoption, trends in usage is going to be vital for any organization. So what does that mean for the poor old website? So we have to ask the question, with all the focus on social media and mobile, is your website still relevant? Well, of course, the answer is still yes, as your social feeds are driving traffic towards your website, and they will do for a long time into the future. While users will engage via social feeds through short, eye-catching headlines, they will then be pushed directly to your website. I will state though, however, that some charities haven't fully invested in the mobile side of their websites. And as site times, loading times can be longer for mobile, investing in this as part of your overall digital strategy is still key to delivering content to your users. And something we're probably all aware of, and one of the most common forms of outbound marketing is still email. But as we can see from these stats, open rates, response rates, and click-throughs, they're all down globally. But contrary to that, the volume of emails has in fact increased, and it's up by 8% year on year. So it stands to reason that you guys are aware of this, and you realise that you've got to engage beyond email. And this is why it's all backed up by the social engagement statistics from the previous slides. But I'd argue that email isn't quite dead yet. If you understand that new donors only have a retention rate of just 25%, and that engaged donors is 59%, you can see that by creating a trusted relationship in some way with the donor, existing channels such as email remain very, very relevant, particularly when you're delivering content that is personalized to your donors. So why are we all here today, and why do we need to go to all this effort to create digital experiences? Isn't it enough that everyone's creating loads of content, delivering across all these different channels? Unfortunately, no. The world has changed again, and everyone from charities through to businesses are having to change with it. We can see that donors' feeds, social, email, and web are saturated with news stories, thought pieces, discount offers, promotions, and any number of pieces of eye-catching content. And because of this, their tastes have changed. Donors are no longer happy to be seduced by clever sound bites. The general perception is clickbait titles suck you in. When you think you're about to read a valuable story, you find out it's there to essentially just bring in clicks and advertising revenue. So we can see why the top industry analysts are showing that a preference for personalized content where the donor is engaged can lead to significant improvements, lifting revenue by 20%, 86% more likely to redonate, and 89% retention rates. And of course, retention is critical. All of this, everything we've discussed so far, is based on these statistics. We know the retention rates, particularly amongst first-time donors, has dropped significantly. So how do we create an experience that captures the promises from the previous slide? How can we create digital experiences that mean something to donors? Okay, I've said engage and engagement a lot. What does this actually mean for this new audience? Because millennials do seem to get a bad rap, and I've got two of them as sons, especially in the press as well. The truth is that this demographic is highly engaged in the charity sector, and it's willing to support charities either financially or through their own time. So it's vitally important to reach out to these guys in the right way. These numbers show that if you can reach out to millennials with absolute transparency, with a personalized message, and can show how their money has been spent, then retention will be high. And there is a significant chance that they're going to share this with their friends who will also get involved. So how do you do it? First thing really is to consider creating donor profiles. About 4 or 5 personas of whom you believe your donor is, what they do for a living, what their income is, and what they look for when making donation decisions. And I'm sure this is the kind of thing that you guys have done previously. got to look for certain traits within your core donors compared to your charity's mission. This way, you get to know your prospects rather than hunting down new ones based purely on sort of high-level geodemographic profiles or just what their spending power is. I would say that you need to be aware of the different social channels. So Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter, they all attract different kinds of demographics. Facebook and LinkedIn's core millennials will tend to be older, so closer to 30, 35. Instagram and Twitter are going to be popular across all age groups, but if you're looking to target students, Instagram is where you need to be, and it should be your primary channel. But if you're looking for younger professionals, then LinkedIn and Twitter. So Google Analytics is a good resource for finding out these kind of general trends and giving you kind of basic personas based on how you understand these individuals. But we're going to take a look now at how you get more granular data from each individual user. Because profiles generally are based on research. They're a kind of a guess around, studies that are done on this particular profile, and again, merging in your Google Analytics data. We're going to be talking about building out segmentation, and personas are the basis of your segments. And if you get your segments right, you can then deliver bespoke content to each user, and this has numerous benefits. It allows you to talk in a way that the donor will understand. Also be aware that you can go too far down the rabbit hole. The temptation with personalized experiences is that you can be all things to all people. For example, you could change message based on geolocation, by browser type, by the originating channel, whether it's Twitter or wherever, the time of year, the day, any number of factors. So you've got to be clear on your segmentations and deliver simple content and simple messaging that will appeal. Never forget that you are one more digital experience a millennial has on a day-to-day basis. But that said, don't become clickbait. And finally, never forget the basics of running your charity. Creating a world-class digital experience strategy won't help you if you don't have a reliable, great website, for example, great customer service, and easy-to-use e-commerce options. So while the ethos is completely different, commercial companies have a laser focus on customer experience within their digital portfolio. They understand that reducing the number of clicks and ease of interaction is vital to success. So based on everything we've discussed so far, and the number of analysts and media all discussing the same thing, it's easy to see that engaging with donors and personalizing their experiences will reap rewards. But how do we go about building these experiences? As with all things, fail to plan, plan to fail. Deciding on your strategy will be key. Keeping in mind the thoughts from the previous slides, you can be ambitious, but you've got to keep it simple. Do you know who your donors are? We discussed using Google Analytics as a great tool for understanding general geodemographics of your website visitors. Do you know what their favorite social channel is? What's their geolocation? How many times have they engaged with you in the past? Which content do they repeatedly come back to? And when you A/B test, which permutations are working? So based on this data, you can start to think about where they are in their journey. Which articles have brought them into the website? Do they repeatedly come back without looking to donate? Is it just information they're after? Have they taken themselves to the point of donation, but then not done so? Or are they looking for opportunities to give up their time, but haven't taken the first step? It's important because if you understand who a donor is and where they are in their journey, you can start to consider which strategies will help them make the next step. Consider a prospect who feels they want to give their personal time to your charity. They repeatedly view the content that describes how and when they can do so, but they won't take the next step for some reason. Maybe you could engage with them by offering a personalized newsletter as the next stage in the funnel. This is where email becomes interesting because it's a voluntary engagement and it offers an opportunity to showcase how others are giving up their time. So the good that it does for the wider community, the ease at which they can do it, as well as the social element of being involved. All these things can be offered to the prospect as great reasons to be taking the next step. And I know that newsletters are kind of old hat, but if you think about this in terms of a conversation, and an ongoing process, it starts to become more interesting. Also consider how you will evaluate the success of your campaigns. Initially, it may be to monitor each click-through for each personalized content, but ultimately you're going to need goals such as donor volunteer time or donor shared content to measure your success. Okay, how do we get there? How do we get to understand our donors as they visit our website? This is how we at Acquia talk about this process with our customers. It's about taking those anonymous visitors or prospects beyond the Google Analytics general information into granular, individual, unknown prospects. Eventually, you should be thinking in terms of being able to deliver very specific content to each segmentation of anonymous donor. And you will be able to do this in real time based on how the anonymous donor is interacting with the website. And then finally, when the donor has traveled down the funnel and engagement is reached, you can capture a key piece of data such as an email address or a social handle and integrate with your CRM data. This takes you to the next level of understanding of who your donor base is, what they prefer, how they engaged, and ultimately, how best to talk to them. So I already feel like I'm getting a little bit repetitive with these quotes, but they're important just to emphasize how everyone is starting to realize the old way of distributing generic content in the hope that it attracts interest is going to stay with the pack, and that the best-in-class charities are going to forge ahead. So we're beginning to get an idea of how to go about this. How do we turn this indictment from Forrester Group you see here into, of what we do, into how to do it? Well, this is an interpretation of that exact quote, but in solution terms. And this is how we at Acquia talk to our customers who are actively taking the first steps in getting this right. Being able to syndicate content across multiple channels is key, whether that is direct to a content management system web front end or feeding content to a custom phone app, through to digital signage telling commuters when their train will arrive. And yes, that's something that we have done. These are all case studies for the omni-channel delivery of content. And because you have a solution that delivers content from a single source, you create a single view of the donors across all your channels, whether they are anonymous, known, or understood. You can ensure the content viewed across devices and channels is consistent to the donor segmentation. And as everyone on this webinar understands, the key is to deliver a relevant message at the right time in the right format. Okay, so I talked about the digital maturity curve. Where are you? We're about to discuss what digital experiences and digital experience solutions should look like. So it's important to be realistic about where you are starting from. As I mentioned earlier, you've got to have the basics in place. You've got to have great web hosting with great speeds, and of course, all you great guys on the webinar today, you've got to have a great marketing team, great PR team, and you've got to be doing innovative things and generating great content. But you've got to be prepared to change, right? There are steps to take when venturing into personalization and donor journeys. We call it crawl, walk, run. Doing things the old way and expecting a difference won't work. Yes, you're still going to be maintaining your website as you always do, but you've got to think of each donor journey as a mini campaign with a clear funnel, content to drive that funnel, and an ambition to keep the conversation going so that the experience becomes meaningful and the donor is truly engaged. And we're going to look at some journeys in a step-by-step manner. It's important to stress that, yes, I'm talking about Acquia's products and services here in a generic sense, but I know that this is not a one-size-fits-all solution. There are many solutions out there aimed at different sized organizations with varying budgets. So once you're determined to build digital experiences for your donors, the first step is to start to understand them on an anonymous level. This means being able to track each user as they interact with your website. So I've seen some sites starting to use Google ID as a means to do so. It's a great way of tying all your Google tracking data down to a granular level because it gets that individual user ID. However, when presented to the user, it looks like a formal login process. So personally, I find that off-putting. I also think it's kind of overkill for what you're trying to achieve here. So still, the best approach is to use cookies. Since GDPR, people have a tendency to just accept this consent policy when interacting with a website because it pops up on literally every website and it's become an annoyance. But we feel it's still the best way of clearly laying out your intentions to the donor. And you've got to explain why this is beneficial to both parties. And of course, for those who are privacy motivated, it's a great way of showing your honest intentions. And ultimately as well, also, if someone does not want to be tracked, you're going to know right then and there. But once you've gained consent, the donor interactions are tracked over time. And again, it's important to stress that this is down to the individual granular level. As donors interact, you'll begin to formulate how each user gravitates to certain content and where you see them fitting in with your geo-demographics. From here, this data will ultimately help you build your donor segmentations ready for personalization. What would a personalization look like? Once you have collected data over time and decided on your segmentations, it's time to think about providing the right content. So this could be in different ways. You may want to test your segmentations to start off with. For this, you could potentially A/B test some of your content to see which drives the most click-throughs. Or you could offer content recommendations. So for example, something like, based on your segmentation, other donors in your segment also liked this particular content, and then you just show a list of content that is displayed. But ultimately, however, you really want to drive a targeted personalization, a piece of content aimed specifically at that donor segmentation. So a simple example would be a geographic personalization. The donor is based in Manchester. What events are currently on in Manchester that they could either participate in or donate towards? But potentially it could be a more sophisticated scenario. So the assumption is that the visitor wants to donate in some way. What if there is more to it than that? We know the donor's location, it's Manchester, but we notice they have viewed your fundraising pages. So this is a potential donor who wants to engage in a deeper way. In this case, you present the donor with examples of people who have fundraised on your behalf, perhaps point them to meetups for other fundraisers in their local area, and find some way of encouraging them to participate. Another example may be that if you're a research charity, perhaps the donor is based in Manchester, shows an interest in fundraising for you, but also is looking to apply for research funding, right? So a fairly complex scenario. But you can see, once you understand these things and segment them, that this narrows down to a very, very specific message to a donor who has multiple interests in your charity. So the next stage is to make your personalizations work for you, right? So you think about how you currently build your funnels. Why are you relevant to your prospects? Will this meaningful engagement convert the prospect from anonymous through to known and ultimately a conversion in the form of donating time or money? So perhaps the best start and simplest method of funnel progression is capturing a piece of personal data through a call to action. Maybe signing up to a newsletter or capturing a social sign-in of some kinds. So, and this is going to prove, incredibly valuable information as we move forward towards the understood user. But for now, it's a great way to start engaging with the donor. Okay, so great. We've created anything from 5 to 10 segments based on our listening and understanding how personas are interacting with content on the website. And now what we want to do is basically serve up the right content to them. We want to personalize that content. So through this engagement, we've created the beginnings of a relationship, right? And we've had progress through capturing an email address, or a social handle from the donor. At this stage, these are not yet donors, but they're prospects. So how do we then qualify our new leads and push them down the funnel to conversion? So you guys, marketers, this isn't going to be rocket science. However, it does consider some thoughts as to what the social, geographic, demographic profile of this particular segment is, what they're interested in, what do other people in this segment do and like. Funnel progression becomes more interesting when you think in terms of segments. There is no one size fits all anymore. We can see here a potential journey from prospect to donor, from unknown prospect through to understood donor. After the initial anonymous visits, the prospect is placed in a segment based on their behavior compared to other visitors. After presenting them with personalized content, we begin to engage and capture an email address and Twitter handle. We build a campaign for this segment at this stage of the funnel and email them directly with a call to action. We can see if the user has opened and clicked through the email, and when they do click through, we want to make sure that when their landing page is personalized to them. But let's assume at this stage the user doesn't engage, right? So we run a few A/B versions of the same campaign, but in this time it's going to be tweeted out. And what we didn't know is that this user prefers to look at Twitter. They look at Twitter a lot more, and they engage because it's their primary social medium, essentially. So again, they come in and the landing page is personalized to them, and that can be done on either on urchin codes or based on their Twitter ID. And because we're able to engage with the user across multiple channels and have a single view of the user's history, we're kind of building a two-way conversation. Perhaps we challenge the user at some stage of the funnel, right? We ask relevant questions through a form or capture responses. The idea being to remove any inhibitions they may have around donation. And we're going to start, going to stand a much better chance of that if the conversation is entirely relevant and personalized to the donor. So, you guys are marketers, you know funnels better than I do, and how you build that is up to you. But hopefully I'm describing methods that increase your chances of success, right? We're understanding anonymous users down to a granular level. We're putting personalized content in front of them. We're inviting them down a funnel through simple two-way interaction. We're actually creating a conversation, and it's across all of your outbound channels. There is a scenario, of course, is, what about those prospects that go straight to donate? The A to Z guys. Well, great. If they wanted to donate and they did, but isn't it also useful to build a segment around these people too? If they go straight to donate, don't you want more of these people, and don't you want to understand who they are and where they come from? So if you segment them and you begin to understand how they interact with you, that's great information over a longer period of time. Okay, what about those worrying statistics on donor retention? A 13% reduction for first-time donors. This is where the understood donor comes into force. It may be that you have captured other data points for each donor in your CRM. So doesn't it make sense to bring all of that information into a single source? So maybe using the donor ID, which is potentially an email address that's unique. You can use that as a composite key. So that's something that's essentially unique across the CRM and the digital experience solution. And then you can bring the data sets together and you can start to build powerful data assets that can be examined. You can either do that through data analytics, but maybe you want to be more innovative, and you can use artificial intelligence to identify behaviors, or essentially, and this is really appealing if you get it right, to predict outcomes. And you'll see the blue dotted line here. The other element to consider in this slide is journey orchestration. So this is going to be key to your success, right? How do you organize everything? Depending on your size as a charity, the solution you choose may or may not have journey orchestration built in. So you should aim for a campaign management tool that orchestrates across the journey, the funnel progression, outbound and inbound tools, filtering the data into a single view. But even if you do that, there's going to be some tasks that are going to need to be coordinated manually. So as we discussed earlier, you own the funnel. So you've got to plan across segments, and that's going to be a new discipline for you. And as you draw out what a funnel looks like for each segment, you've got to be able to design content that is appropriate, for the segment, for the funnel. And of course, on top of this, there are tools that are industry standard. So they typically don't come as part of the digital experience stack. So I'm thinking Hootsuite here. So that's going to remain the place you orchestrate your outbound social messages. Manual orchestration is going to be required, and you have to make sure that it aligns across the digital experience platform. So we've built our solution. We're capturing granular unknown prospect data, pushing down the funnel to capture an ID of some kind, and then engaging through that ID with a single view of user data. And we're going to do that over time across multiple channels to ultimately convert the prospect into a donor. We are then bringing together all of our data to truly understand our donors. This is great, and hopefully you can see how powerful this is, but it doesn't end there. We know first-time donor retention is down, but what do we know about existing donors? There are still retention challenges there. So if we're able to use the digital experience to increase our donors based on relevant and engaging content, how then, knowing the expense of gaining new donors, can we ensure we retain them? You've probably heard of the Harvard Business School concept of customer delight. So at first you kind of think there's some kind of one-upmanship from customer satisfaction. But there is method to the madness. Essentially, it describes giving your donors such great service, either digitally or manually or both, that they become champions for your cause. So if we truly understand our donors and their behaviors, what can we do to ensure they become fans? What did we hear earlier when we discussed millennials? They want to be in the loop. Now that we're able to have two-way conversations and capture the responses to these conversations in a single data source, we can start A/B testing our responses to those donors. Remember that millennials would donate if they could get feedback on their donation. This becomes a standard week-to-week or month-to-month conversation with the donor, and you measure and evaluate your impact on the donor. So what I mean by that is, have they become an advocate for your cause? Are they, tweeting out your content? This is what fans are, and they don't just turn up though. That's the problem. They don't just turn up and start flying the flag for you. You've got to put the effort in. You've got to justify the donor's donation has done good. You've got to ensure that they have seen and understand the impact the donation has had. You've got to show similar cases. You've got to keep a constant feedback loop in progress across all the channel that particular donor prefers. And if you can do all this, you will have fans. Okay, let's summarize. This is what we in Acquia see as best in class, a CMS that captures unknown user data to a single data source, that feeds personalized content to a syndication tool that can deliver the content directly back to the CMS or to a number of other channels. Outbound tools deliver personalized messages, and inbound tools listen to the responses and the actions of donors. And all of this is orchestrated across a single view of the donor. So again, you may be thinking this is too much for you, and it could be, in fact, that you are the IT, the content, the agency, and the marketing team all rolled into one person. I'd say to you guys, don't worry about it. There are things that you can do that are low cost, easy to use, that will have a good impact on your charity. So for example, one of the simplest tools to use out there is Google Optimize. It comes as part of the Google stack, which means it's free, or as free can be these days. And it offers basic functions of personalization as part of a freemium package. So, for example, based on criteria such as visited so many times in the last 30 days, you can begin to offer simple personalizations to unknown prospects, which, if you cleverly construct them, that can help you drive your funnel. But for the mid-sized to enterprise level charities, the question becomes, which platform and which solution is best suited to deliver this as a strategy, and doing so in the simplest and most cost-effective way. All right, so this is my next to last quotation of the day, I promise. I hope if I've done my job today, that I've described each one of these recommendations you see here in my analysis. You've got to connect the dots. You need a system that's going to deliver omni-channel content. You've got to be quick. The fundamentals must be in place to deliver a great service. You've got to be useful. You've got to be delivering personalized content that's relevant to the donor. And you've got to be there for them, right? You've got to understand your donors You've got to be in a position to anticipate their needs. And here's Acquia's take on the same thing, right? So I'm not going to go through each one of these because there's a lot. And it's mainly a takeaway for you to read later. But if you're thinking of engaging on a personalization strategy and wish to deliver meaningful experience to your donors, then you've got to ask yourself each of these questions. You've got to draw up a high-level impact assessment to justify your investment. And if you're not sure on any of these, don't worry. Please feel free to contact me afterwards using the details given at the end of the webinar, and I'll do my best to guide you through. Okay, so close to the end now, just a quick look at some of the creative stories that are out there, a couple of case studies, and then some fun examples that I caught my eye that I like. So first one is the Youth Hostel Association. First things first, right? We talked about getting the basics right. This is a fundamental proposition at Acquia, using the open source content management system Drupal as a foundation for delivering high quality, fast, and mobile tuned content that any visitor would expect from your website. It may seem basic, but never forget it, right? And as you can see from this case study, by taking this step, the YHA experienced significant improvements to their web and mobile traffic by hosting with Acquia. Next one is WaterAid. So WaterAid engaged with Acquia to talk about personalization. They wanted to understand their donor base to a greater degree. And they recognized the potential because they'd obviously engaged with a bunch of industry analysts. And they didn't really know much about their anonymous audience outside of the Google Analytics data. And I think this is going to be something that resonates with pretty much all of you, is you've got a big bucket of information based on who visited your page. So they knew they wanted to get it down to the granular level. So they installed Lift, and that, as it stands right now, is sitting there and it's capturing that granular anonymous data as each visitor visits the website. And they've been accumulating that information. And the next steps for them are now to start building funnels for each segment after they've created segmentations, and then to build A/B tests and targeted personalizations for each segment. And yep, they're going to be engaging with Acquia and starting very soon with simple personalizations. So WaterAid are ahead of the game, right? They've already had this. They've got a whole chunk of data that they're working with now, and they're beginning to segment their user base and looking to personalize content for each one. So Blue Plaque Bot, right? This is an odd one. You probably haven't heard of it, but I love Blue Plaque Bot. It's a great example of leveraging Twitter in a proactive way to raise your profile. Essentially, it passively listens out the tweets, and I'm presuming that's just in the UK. It listens out the tweets that mention Blue Plaque, and then it just retweets them. That's what it does. It's simple, inventive, and it's fun, right? I first came across it when I tweeted on Armistice Day last year, and the person I was speaking about had been nominated for a Blue Plaque, and I didn't know this, but Blue Plaque Bot just grabbed it, liked it, and retweeted it. And you can see here in the slide in front of you, I've tried to recreate that, and it doesn't seem to work for every single quote. So everyone you see on there has a Blue Plaque. And if I mentioned Blue Plaque, it retweeted, but I said, look, I loved reading Charles Dickens. That didn't work. And, I did a Shakespeare quote in there somewhere. That didn't work either. So it's got its limitations, and you potentially understand why, but it's a great use of keywords. And I think that it could easily be extended to interpret natural language using artificial intelligence. And then you can deliver responses based on the tweeter's sentiment, right? Good, bad, indifferent, that kind of thing. And that, again, that's going to be able to drive prospects to your website. But word of warning, these things are open to abuse, and you have to carefully control what you should and should not retweet. Digital donations, right? I recently visited a famous museum in London, and in the entrance, right, there's a large perspex box, and visitors are encouraged to donate cash towards the upkeep of the museum, right? Because it's subsidized by the government, but they're asking for donations. But the box, of course, was only a quarter full. Now, why do you think this is? You know, is it that people are really mean these days? Well, I don't think so. I think what it really was is that no one at the museum was really thinking about the cashless society that we live in. I think, sure, people would happily donate a few pounds for their visit if they could just swipe their phone. And funnily enough, the Church of England recognises this because they've made all of their donations on a Sunday in church cashless. So if you think about that end-to-end journey again, we can trace our anonymous visitors from an early website visit all the way through to an electronic payment. So social again, and I think it's worth re-emphasising, you know, social is where everyone hangs out, but the channels may change over time. So you've got to be nimble, right? So I'll ask randomly to everybody on the webinar, have you ever heard of Twitch? Because Twitch is one of the most popular channels right now. So, you know, go look it up if you haven't. But if you aren't engaging on social, you're definitely missing out. And if those of you who think you're doing a great job, well, you probably are, but remember the previous slide we had, only 50% of you are leveraging LinkedIn and Instagram, and Instagram is the rising star. So these are great opportunities, again, to drive prospects to your website and begin personalizing their experiences. And the final thought really is digital advertising. So it's a short reminder really that we're becoming increasingly dependent on digital initiatives to drive fundraising. So we can see that a major percentage of advertising spend is there to directly raise funds. So therefore, it's vitally important that we get the message right. Based on our new understanding of your donor segments, you can drive personalized advertising campaigns that support your digital experience and close that loop using the urchin codes, the sort of UTM codes that link back to your website, allowing you to track click-throughs all the way through to conversions. And that's going to help you measure all of your goals accurately. Another way to think about this is to use personalization to augment your ad spend, right? So, you know, there's a lot of ad blocking technology and declining click-through rates that we know about. So ensuring personalized content reaches the right places can prove vital to your fundraising in the long run. So, as promised, here it is, the final quotation of the day. The fact that you are on this webinar means that you're somewhere on that digital maturity curve, but you recognize that this is the path for your organization. Digital should be your backbone. It should lead to how you engage, how you facilitate, how you provide services, and how you run your charity. So many thanks for your participation in today's webinar. Hoping it's given you a clear understanding of how digital experiences through personalization and journey orchestration has the potential to significantly improve your fundraising. At this point, I'm going to hand back to Chris and I'll answer any questions. Do not worry if I don't answer yours because we have a few here. So I'll respond to as many as I can via email after the webinar.
Thank you, Nigel. Thank you very much. That was incredibly insightful, I thought. I mean, key takeaway for me was, you know, that donors really want to be heard in this day and age, and you have to take them on that journey from beginning to end. I think what sprung to mind to me is a good example from my personal ventures. It's like a different donation in a sense, but still a donation. I recently gave blood.
Okay.
And blood.co.uk go through this take you on this great journey from the beginning. They know when to hit you at the right time, you know, where your local donation centre is, all that sort of stuff. When they're coming up, you get emails, text, and they make a really good use of text. But then at the end, more importantly than anything else, they send you a text of where your blood's gone. It goes to this hospital. And I just think that's a great, as you say, like close the loop. I just think they do that really well of hitting that digital marketing sweet spot of, you know, the right content to the right audience at the right place at the right time.
It's a great story, and I think what that reminds me of, because obviously I talk to corporates as well, that reminds me of the Disney experience, which is what everybody aspires to, right? It's that I've booked with Disney, right? So then I download their app, and all of a sudden I get all this information telling me, you know, I can book this ride on a certain day. And, you know, I can organize all of my transport through it, right? So when it comes to my holiday, I know exactly where I've got to be at every one particular point in time. I've got all my itinerary. They guide you through the whole experience of your holiday. But then afterwards, they'll contact you again later and, you know, encourage you to come back. So similar thing.
continuous push back into that funnel start again, and exactly. All right, let's dive into some questions. Before we get started, we've got a few come in already, but please, if you want to get your question answered, hit the Q&A button on the bottom center of the screen and submit via there. So let's get started. First one from an anonymous attendee. We talked about this a little bit throughout the presentation, but what is the difference between a persona and a segment? Okay,
fair question. And I must admit, I'd sort of deliberately skimmed over that a little bit because it's probably a webinar in itself. So I guess for a lot of you who have been involved in coding or building websites, you probably sat down and discussed with your developers the different personas involved and what their user stories are. And essentially what that means is that you're kind of identifying who's going to be interacting with the website, how it needs to be built by describing that story, that user story, that journey for that user story. So segments are kind of different, right? So essentially, if you're looking at your donor base, right, they're not just a persona anymore. They're not a persona of they use the website. You're looking at them in terms of what kind of people are they? Right, and I think this will be a term that's going to be very familiar to marketers anyway, right? Geodemographic profiles, all of that good stuff. But it could be that a segment is one persona, right? Individually, that persona is so big that that's a massive segment. But it could also be 2, 3, 4 buckets of personas become one segment, right? So you're not sort of, I don't say discriminating, but you're not kind of like just assuming things by age, by gender will mean certain things. You're looking at how users are looking at your content and how that relates to your charity missions and how you can get those guys who may or may not be donating further down the funnel. So there's a slight nuance in the difference between the two.
Great. Next question. Can Adonis still be anonymous and understood, or is it vital to capture data such as an email address?
And that's fair play. So I sort of kind of no is the answer on that one, I think. I'd like to say yes, but probably no, because the whole point of the understood user, and again, this is just terminology that we use, but it is to get the ID so you can use that as some kind of composite key, so you can start bringing in CRM data, other data from other systems. But that said, it's not essential really to capture an information. There's some interesting statistics in the charity industry around memberships, right? Organizations that have memberships have high retention rates, very high retention rates, and good donations, very, very regular donation rates, because people are engaged. So even if somebody stays anonymous, we don't know who they are, but we know they keep coming back. Yeah. And we know they respond to content in certain ways. So we know things about them that allows us to segment, which means that we can respond to that. So, we're making calculated assumptions or calculated decisions based on their segmentation. And then we're creating that discussion. So we don't know who you are, but we know you're this segment, right? And then here's a piece of content we think you'll like. And then you narrow that down. You build your funnel based on your repetition and your testing to get them to the point where they feel, even though that they haven't signed up or given you any kind of information at all, that they are actively talking to you. And then, obviously the next best step is to get a Twitter handle or an email address, because then it opens up all the other channels outside of the website.
Yeah, exactly. It's about not writing them off, just because they haven't, but keep pushing them down that line, and eventually.
Yeah, and that could be over like, a week or months or a year even.
Exactly. So we have the next question from Heidi. She's asking, what CRM would you recommend for charities?
That's a great question. I'm going to decline to answer that one, I'm afraid, because I can't show a preference either way. All right, Heidi, I promise I'll get back to you on that one individually. All right, so I'm not allowed to advertise.
The next question from Dean. He says, I'm new to my job as the marketing and fundraising officer for my charity here in Bristol. Can you suggest any other webinars or resources to start my understanding? He goes on to say, this is a great webinar, but I need to start with the basics. I can jump in on that one to start that ball rolling, and then feel free to take over. Dean, we actually have a number of webinars on the charity digital news site that are at a range of levels. We've done a few with Lightful that go into the basics of setting up social media channels in your calendar, that then continue to dive into personalization and building a community. So I definitely recommend going and checking them out, along with a few others we have on there around CRM and GDPR. So I would head over to our site in the webinar tab and start there. But Nigel, I don't know if you have anything.
Well, I mean, I think in the interest of being neutral, that's a great place to start. Absolutely. I would recommend some of the Acquia stuff. In fact, I think we've got the email address. I'll send you a bunch of links afterwards. We've got some really good content, and yes, it's Acquia, but take that with a pinch of salt and use it as a training resource. We've got a really, really good resource called docs.acquia.com, and that describes how all of our products work. Now, if you look at the Acquia Lift product, which is our personalization tool, actually it talks you through a lot of the concepts, so you'll get a feel. But industry-wide stuff, yeah, I've got a whole bunch of bookmarks that I can send you that I feel that will help you sort of get there from the ground up.
Great, and that's great help. Thank you. Next question from Nikki. The question is about donors. You mentioned that easy to click through and donate is key. What low-cost tools are on the market that build in easy to Drupal websites, that plug in easy to Drupal websites?
So there are a couple of modules on Drupal.org, right? And they are primarily focused on A/B testing, but there are a lot of people using them. The Acquia Lift product is obviously our product, and that's kind of what we see as best in class. Again, it's what are you trying to achieve is the name of the game. So I think, again, I'll probably have a conversation on that one, because I think I need to understand what you're trying to achieve, and whether there's a module on acquia.org that can help you, because essentially there's something in the region of about 10,000 modules, and it's hard to pluck one out of the air, to be fair.
We'll pick that one up offline. The last two questions then we'll cover, because I'm just aware of the time. Question from Daniel here. If the ICO's recommendation for making all analytics cookies opt-in are enforced, then would that mean that the granular data that Acquia collects would no longer be possible without a sign-in portal? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, and I think that's the same for everyone.
Yeah.
It's a truth that we can't get around. I mean, if you're like me, you are getting fed up with pop-ups when you go to random websites. But it's the law of unintended consequences. I don't think anybody really foresaw this. Everybody thought GDPR was great because it's all about protection. Actually, it was a horrible compromise that leaves us in the situation that we're in. But the direct answer to your question is yes. And I would say in that situation, respect it, right? If somebody doesn't want to be tracked, then fair enough. There's going to be enough people who don't mind. One of the recommendations we make all the time at Acquia is that when you put your cookies up and you have your consent policy up, to just explain, in clear and plain English, that it's in everybody's interest to do this. And if people can't understand that, then, well, maybe they're not the right donors for you, if that makes any sense. Yeah, no, I think it's a fair point. I think in this day and age, people are willing to give a little bit of data for something that they really want to buy into. Exactly that. So I think that's an important point. Final question from Gemma, and this might be a good insight into some of the the charities that you've worked with in terms of their pain points. Where do you start when choosing an agency who can build a website that incorporates data collecting to help deliver an augmented personal experience? Okay, all right. So it's a great question. So we work with one of Acquia's business models is working with agencies. All right, so we work with a whole bunch of these guys, and we take them through a training process. And where we try and leave them is that they, and trust me on this, these guys are very, very smart. I mean, they know the digital experience well anyway. But personalization is fairly new, and it's that abstract concept of personas. How do you get a persona into a segment? How do you build a channel that's based around it? How do you make all that good stuff? So you're really going to be asking them, do they have a digital experience consultant? That's got to be the key question. And can they describe to you the journey that they're going to take you on, right? Can they describe to you how they're going to build your personas? Yeah. Can they tell you with a degree of certainty that you're going to get some kind of success out of this?
Yeah.
Back to those sort of 10 points that we put up there.
Yeah.
Ultimately, you need an ROI on this.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what's the point? But the numbers are there, the stats are there, prove that this does work. So hopefully I've answered that question. Again, feel free to reach out to me if I haven't. But yeah, look for a digital experience consultant. Look for them to be able to describe to you how they're going to take you through that process and get you to that goal that you need to be to.
Perfect. Well, that's all our questions, and that's all from us here at Charity Digital and Acquia. Nigel, huge thank you to you once again. Some great insights there. And of course, thank you to all of you for joining us today. If you want to get in touch with Nigel or myself or anyone else from the day, you can do so by following the email addresses on screen. Please feel free to reach out to us with any additional questions you have. As we both mentioned earlier, we'll be sending out the recording of this webinar along with slides, some additional resources covered in today's webinar via email. We tend to do this in the next week or so. And we'll also upload it to the Charity Digital News website where you can go and rewatch anytime, and of course, share with your colleagues and networks. If you would also be so kind, please don't forget to fill out the feedback form that we send right after this. It's a really short, quick 2-minute survey, and it does go a long way to helping us continuously improve our webinar service and helps us bring you the best possible content. Our next webinar will be same time next Thursday. That's the 22nd of August, and we'll focus on the HMRC's Making Tax Digital initiative. This initiative requires all charities to submit their tax returns and payments through compliance software by October 1st, 2019. We partnered with digital tax experts NetSuite to tell you the key steps needed to become digital tax compliant by October. This is mandatory for all charities and organisations. So if you haven't begun this process, I would really recommend that you go and sign up and share with whoever runs the account and operations in your organisation. And you can sign up by heading over to charitydigitalnews.co.uk/webinars. Big thank you once again, everybody, and we hope to see you again soon.